This morning, as I was sitting in here getting ready for the time together, Lisa sat next to me, and as they were singing that song, I leaned over to her and I said, you know one of the great things about this church? The amazing types of music we get out of people that are here. It really is amazing how different it can sound with just a little switch here and there. And so they deserve a lot of our praise. And of course, I'm also always amazed when a song like the one they just did comes up and you realize how well it fits to what you're about to say. And all Thornton had to do was two little scriptures to pick from and about a sentence or two of what I wrote way back in June about what this would be like. And the music always seems to fit, and that is a tribute to him and to God's Spirit. I'd like you to listen now to a reading from the Gospel of Mark, two different sections. This is from Mark, the 14th chapter. I'll begin reading at verse 17, and I will jump down then to verse 66. This is the word of the Lord. After sunset, he came with the 12, and as they were at the supper table eating, Jesus said, I have something hard but important to say to you. One of you is going to hand me over to the conspirators, one who at this very moment is eating with me. Stunned, they started to ask one after another, is it me? Is it? He said, it's one of the 12, one who eats with me out of the same bowl. In one sense, it turns out that the Son of Man is entering into a new way of treachery well marked by the Scriptures. No surprise here. In another sense, the man who turns him in turns traitor to the Son of Man. Better never to have been born than to do this. In the course of their meal, having taken and blessed the bread, he broke it and gave it to them. Then he said, take, this is my body. Taking the chalice, he gave it to them, thanking God, and they drank from it. He said, this is my blood, God's new covenant, poured out for many people. I'll not be drinking wine again until the new day when I drink it in the kingdom of God. They sang a hymn and then went directly to Mount Olives. Jesus told them, you all going to feel that your world is falling apart and that it's my fault. There's a scripture that says, I will strike the shepherd, the sheep will go helter-skelter. But after I'm raised up, I will go ahead of you, leading the way to Galilee. Peter blurted out, even if everyone else is ashamed of you, when things fall into pieces, I won't be. Jesus said, don't be so sure. Today, this very night, in fact, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. He blustered in protest. Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. All the others said the same thing. While all this was going on, Peter was down in the courtyard. One of the chief priest's servant girls came in and, seeing Peter warming himself there, looked hard at him and said, you were with the Nazarene, Jesus. He denied it. I don't know what you're talking about. He went out on the porch. A rooster crowed. The girl spotted him and began telling the people standing around, he's one of them. He denied it again. After a little while, the bystanders brought it up again. You've got to be one of them. You've got Galilean written all over you. Now Peter got really nervous and swore, I never laid eyes on this man you're talking about. Just then the rooster crowed a second time. Peter remembered how Jesus had said, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. He collapsed in tears. The best laid plans. It was my final semester at Louisville Seminary, and it was that exciting time when you know you're almost done, a few courses left, and you get to go to the library. This was time before a lot of internet and everything, and you got to go through these big, thick notebooks of all the churches looking for pastors. It was a fun time for all of us. And I remember Joanne and I talking about, here's an opportunity for us. What do we want this to look like? And so we began making plans. There were a couple things we wanted to be sure of. One is that I wanted to be pastor in my own small church. I didn't want to be on a large staff somewhere. That wasn't too much to ask, considering how many smaller churches there are in Presbyterian denomination versus how many really large churches there are. The odds were on my side. I grew up next to a church. I lived in a house the church owned, and I watched as my dad, when he went on disability, had nowhere to go, literally, and very little things to take with them. If it weren't for a friend who gave him a free apartment, I don't know where they would have gone. So we determined the second thing. We would own our own house, so we could build equity. So when we had to move, or it came time for us to leave the ministry, we would have something to rely upon and not be like my mom and dad. And the third thing, yes, not real significant, but significant to us, we grew up in the north. Oh, how we wanted to be in the south, in the warmth. So we could call home in January and February and say, yes, we were just outside in shorts, and rub it in. God was listening. Because our first call was to Orchard Park, New York. If you kind of recognize the name, that's outside Buffalo, where the Buffalo Bills play. I ended up in a 1,300-member church as an associate pastor. And the church owned our house. All the best plans we had laid down, thinking, this is all, just these three little things. It's not a lot. And all the plans changed. Isn't that the way it is? What we dream one day, what we plan one day, the next day, it all comes apart. Go into a kindergarten or a first grade room and begin to sample the kids and say, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a fireman. I want to be this or that. Follow those kids and go back to talk to them when they're 20-some years old and see if they're doing what their plan was. Yes, one or two might be, but we know the majority would not be. When I was in college, there were 8 of us in the music department. We were really close friends. After I graduated, when all of us had at that point graduated, out of the 8, 1 was doing music. The 7 of us were doing other things. Things change. You and I know that at times the best laid plans that we put out before us, they change. And often the change isn't something minor, it's something significant in our lives. But here's the thing with plans. I think at times it's our attempt to try and control our life because at times it feels so far out of control. It's our desire to kind of shape it and make it be what we want it to be. And so when those plans change, what's really happening is we're losing control. And that doesn't feel good to us. We want to decide what tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now will look like. It is our attempt to be certain things are going to go the way we want it to go. Today's text that I read this morning, the one from the Gospel of Mark, is like that. Here's Jesus with his disciples. He knows, they do not, that this is their last meal together. Jesus begins to speak about betrayal, about denial. What's the response? Oh, the response. Peter wants nothing to do with it. Jesus, I don't know what the rest of them will do, but you can count on me. I know that whatever happens tomorrow and the day after and the week after that, I will not deny you. That was his plan. That's the way he saw life unfolding. He was in charge. He was in control. Even if others turn away from you, I will not. I'll be faithful. So he planned to be faithful no matter what. We all do that, don't we? Do any of us ever get up in the morning and plan to be unfaithful? Today's the day. Today's the day that I'm just going to take the day off in terms of faith and do whatever I want. No, we're like Peter. We will be faithful. We will not deny you. You see, Peter could not envision a different way that the next few hours would unfold for him. He could only see what was in his mind. He could only perceive what he wanted to see. Every one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, all of them had plans for Jesus in their future. They were ready. No matter what happened, they would not fall away. But think back earlier, about 3 years earlier, when you see these guys out on a boat fishing, you see a few tax collectors in different towns doing their task. They had their plan well thought out. I will be a fisherman. I will be here the rest of my life. I will be throwing nets in the water. I'll be getting fish, and I'll make sure the boats are good and the nets are mended. When my father dies, I will take over this business. The tax collectors, they knew what they had to do, and as they cheated people out of some of their money, they became wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. They had the plan all set up. And then this guy walks by. Come follow me. You notice he didn't have to put up a big argument. Simple words. Come follow me. I'll help you fish in a very different way. Like that, their plans changed. They didn't stop and make arrangements for the rest of life. No, they literally dropped their nets, it said. And they followed him. Plans change. And sometimes they change so very quickly. You and I know that for a fact. One moment, we have a solid career going. We've worked our way up that ladder. Another few years and we're retired. We'll make one or two more rungs up the ladder, and then we're going to retire, and it's all going to be good, only to find out on Friday morning you've been let go. Who's going to hire somebody with only a few years left in their life? Plans change, and they change quickly. 1 second you're driving down the road, you're listening to Tower of Power. Okay, I'm going to show you some of my music. And the next thing you know, in an instant, the car came from nowhere, and you're in a major accident. Life changes. One day you're financially sound. You've got it all worked out, how you're going to retire, how you're going to be able to travel when you retire, how you're going to be able to keep a place here and a small little place down in Florida where it's warm and travel back and forth. And overnight, the stock market crashes. I mean, doesn't drop. It crashes. Remember that a few years ago? People are still waiting to recover. Imagine if you were one, and maybe there are some here, that were getting ready to retire in just a few short months, and the stock market just fell out. Like that, plans change. No more little place in Florida. All the traveling pushed aside. One day, we're healthy as an ox. And the next day, the doctor tells us otherwise. Life's plan changes. Of that, you and I can be 100% certain. I can guarantee you there isn't one person who went through all of life and said, you know what, every day, whatever I had planned out, it always came to be. No, you hear people who are at the end of the journey talking about the way they had the great plans laid out, and all of a sudden, it changed. and it was okay. Stuff happens. These changes can overwhelm us. They can even at times devastate us. Think about it for a moment. How would you be the one who's sitting in the doctor's office to get that terrible news? What would you do if it was a phone call that came to you and your child was killed in an accident? Plans change. Plans change. And these changes can overwhelm us, and these changes can even devastate us, especially when we think we had life figured out and we had it all in control. It was all set in stone. So here's Joshua and the people. The Israelites by now had wandered for so many years. Those who left Egypt had all died off. There were no first-hand stories, just stories handed down to the next generation and the next. And there they found themselves ready to settle into a land, to finally be people who were settled and not nomads. And Joshua gathers them all together and he says, look, you all have a choice to make today. Decide today which God you will serve. Whether it's the gods of the land you just came into, or whether it be Yahweh God who brought you out of Egypt. And of course the people in one voice, we will serve Yahweh God. God is the one we're after. That's their plan, isn't it? They know what they're going to do. They're going to settle into the land. It's all going to be great, and they're going to serve God. And life will be happy ever after. Joshua warned them what would happen. He said, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to get in there, and what you think you have so well planned out, so well thought out, will all of a sudden alter and change. And it did. Nomads aren't farmers. And they found out that when they had to become farmers, they didn't know what to do. And they panicked. And so they turned to the local people, said, how do you farm? Tell me about this. And they said, well, the first thing you do is you get up to the top of the temple and you worship the Baal gods. And they'll make your crops grow. Plans changed. We will serve Yahweh God. And in short order, they're serving and chasing after other gods. You see, you and I have a choice when plans change. We have a choice to decide how we're going to deal with that. Do we accept it, or do we fight it? You see that all the time in people. You see people who accept when plans go awry. And they almost embrace it and say, you know what, this isn't what I had planned for my life, but it'll be okay. I shared the story of the woman who was in the hospital. She was elderly. She had cancer. She had battled it. And I remember going in to see her the day after doctors told her that she only had a couple weeks to live. Her words ring in my head every time I think of her. Jim, this is not a catastrophe. Plans changed, and she made a choice not to fight it, not to get angry, but to embrace it. Now, that's hard to do. I know that's hard to do. Oh, for some changes, yeah, it's a little bit easier. You know, the car breaks down when you weren't planning on it. That's not a hard one to accept if you think about it. Getting the news in a doctor's office is. How do we deal with it? You see, you and I want things to go our way, and when they don't, we begin to question it. We begin to argue it. We begin to challenge the changes in our life. And I'd like to encourage you to think of it this way, because I think this is our number one battle in life. It is a question of over who will be God. Will you be God setting the plans for your life, or will you trust God who says, you know, sometimes things change, and I'm with you. Wherever you go, whatever happens, I am with you. Every day is a choice for us to embrace altered plans or to fight them, to become bitter and angry over the things that happen in life. I think there's a second thing that we're called to think about. Trust God. Now, many of you are sitting here who remember the first time I ever stood here and led you in worship. Remember that? And I know, Carla, some of you don't remember that, so I'm going to tell you. She shook her head. I don't remember. But there's a number of you here, so please excuse the story once again. It's a story about a tightrope walker in Niagara Falls, where the guy, this literally happens, the guy gets on a tightrope and walks back and forth over the falls, and somebody's watching him and says, boy, that's amazing. You are awesome when he comes down off the wire. He said, you think I could do it again? He said, yep, after what I've seen, you're awesome. He gets back, goes out, and does the same thing. This time he adds all kinds of tricks. He lays down on the wire. Have you seen the teaser for that movie? He does that over the falls. When he gets up and comes off, he comes over to the guy who's observing him, and he says, so now what do you think? Do you think I'm really good? He says, oh, man, I know you're great. Do you think I could go out there and do that time and time again and not fall out? Absolutely. No doubt about it. You could go back and forth hundreds of times. You're never going to fall off. Then get on my back and go with me. That's the difference between saying we believe in God and we trust in God. And that's the difference in how we need to be when it comes to changed plans. Do you trust that whether your plans go perfectly the way you want or whether they become drastically different, God is there with you? And that no matter how much you think this is going to alter the landscape of your life, you're willing to trust that in the end, every step you take, no matter how hard, God is with you. Jeremiah, the 29th chapter, the 11th verse. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for your welfare, and not for harm. To give you a future with hope. You see, sometimes when our plans change and we cannot see what's happening, God sees it. And God comes and wants to give us hope. Bad things happen in life. We talked about that. But when they do, when your plans change, can you trust God? Can you trust God with your very life and believe in God's vision for what tomorrow and the day after and every day of your life will hold? Even when all of our plans change for the worse, God is still on our side, always on our side. God is never one to give up on us. I just call your attention to the fact of the text I read this morning out of Mark. One of you eating with me right now will betray me. When Jesus is celebrating the Passover meal, he doesn't say to Judas, look, I got to get this all right. You need to leave because you're about to betray me so we, who are strong believers here, can take care of it. He doesn't say to Peter, look, you're going to deny me 3 times, so you better get out of the room as well so the rest of us can celebrate this meal. No, everybody's there. Even knowing that Judas will betray him, even knowing that Peter will deny him, they're all there. So when our plans change, when we're worried about what tomorrow will bring, God is always on our side. And we need to trust that and believe in that. Back when we were living in Pennsylvania, and we had served way way long time in that church. We were happy in PA, you know that? We had family right around the corner. My mom was 2 hours away. Joanne's mom was about an hour away, if that. We knew everywhere. We knew how to pronounce road names that nobody else could pronounce. Yeah, you go look up Conda de Gwinnett, see if you get it right. You see, we understood that. It was comfortable. We loved it. I saw myself retiring there. And then plans changed. What do? Do you get angry with God? You say, you know what, God? I'm tired of this. If you can't help me work this out, I'm done. I'll find something else to do. No. When we realized it was time to make a change, as never before, we trusted God. Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. We had some great plans in our head for what that would look like. The first church to contact me, Presbyterian Church in downtown Napa, California. You don't tell me your head doesn't start to spin with big plans? Yeah, you know my love of that area. That plan changed. That one wasn't any good. Oh, we had great desires. We thought, you know what? North Carolina would be good because that's where we'd like to retire. And who calls? Montreat. You know the big conference center, the Presbyterian? They have a small church who's meeting there. And they called and said, we want to talk with you. Oh, my head began to spin with great plans for that. Think of the people I would meet that come through the conference center week in and week out. There were churches in Florida. Oh, Florida. What I wouldn't give to live there right at this moment and up until the end of March. We were ready for Florida. We thought that would be great. That would be awesome. There was even a church close to our son in Philadelphia. Had a couple conversations with them. And then I was in Richmond, Virginia, and you called. I'm pointing to Eileen if you're wondering who I'm pointing to, not Clay. You're good, Clay. And she called. She said, hey, I'm from this place, Chatham, Illinois, and there's a Presbyterian church, and we want to talk to you. What do you think? That wasn't in my plan at all. I'd never seen anything about this church. And I said, well, yeah, this is not a good way to start an interview. I know nothing about you. Can you give me a half hour to read about it, and I'll call you back? I'm surprised she didn't hang up. She said, oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I quickly got into the website, and I read the write-up, and I said, you know, that sounds actually pretty good. So I called her back, and I said, yeah, I'd be interested in having a conversation with you. Good, we're going to have 2 people call you from the PNC. It's going to be about a 20 to 25-minute call. It won't take long. Great. When? Saturday morning. Great. I get the phone call. It's you, Sarah, and you, Todd, who are on the phone with me for about an hour and a half. I should have known right then and there this is a lying church. But no, we had a great conversation. And then in no time at all, of course, I got a phone call to come out and have a conversation with you all. We did, we met, we talked, and on the way back, Lisa, who was a privileged one, got to say, well, we talked about this last night. We talked about it over pie at Baker Square. I think it was the pie talking more than the committee, but whatever the case, she said, we'd like for you to come and be here. Let me tell you about this, because Rolling Mountains, a year ago, the Carters went on a trip to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. When they came back, I remember, I think it was you, Evelyn, who said, are you crazy? That is a gorgeous area of the country. You left that? The biggest mountain runs along Gordon Street out here when the field's down. Right at the end of Plummer, you know that? That's a mountain here. I was driving this morning, and that's what I thought. I'm like, that's the best I can get. This is as flat can be. It's windy every day. 75-degree days feel like 50 to me. Can't sit out back. We had other plans. But luckily, we were a little bit older and a little bit wiser than that first call 30 years ago. And we said, God, wherever you want us to go, just give us the courage to hear it. And we did. And we ended up here. We ended up here in this flat land with a lot of wind. If you had said to me a year and a half ago, plan this out, what will this look like? The geography would be different. But I could never have planned this. You see, you all are an amazing group of people. Remember I told you I'd conclude? So you know I'm getting to the end. What we would have had planned would never have put me in touch with you. And yet here we are. What your plans were a couple of years ago, didn't ever envision this guy standing in front of you. Not somebody from Pennsylvania. You were happy with the Baptist from the local area. Now I'm pointing at Ann. And here we are. Plans, if we trust God, work out. God will lead us. God will put us in the right spot at the right moment. And even when we are not listening, God doesn't kick us out. God says it's okay. You're still one of mine. So I ask you this dual question. What does God have planned for your life? What does God have planned for CPC in the coming years?